Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Excuse me. Brian Eckdale. I'm an associate professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. I'd like to thank the library for co-hosting the event with the School of Journalism and Mass Communication tonight. We're really excited to hear from Barbara Kinney. So let me say a few words just to introduce her, and then I'll let her do the important stuff. So Barbara is an award-winning photojournalist. Her work has appeared in a number of magazines, including Time, Newsweek, and People. Most recently, and what she's going to be talking about a lot today, she was the campaign photographer for Secretary Hillary Clinton, traveled in the country for 20 months, spending a lot of that time right here in Iowa as well. And she was also a White House photographer during the Clinton administration. So her connection to the Clintons have remained strong over the years. She's been a freelance photographer for the Clinton Foundation, campaign photographer for then Senator Hillary Clinton in the 2018 presidential primaries, and she was the photographer at Chelsea Clinton's wedding in 2010.
And our wedding.
Oh, and the Lathrops as well, right, yeah. I'll write that in the notes. Yeah. She's traveled internationally, photographing projects for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, excuse me, the Nike Foundation, CARE, and the Eastern Congo Initiative. During her career, she's worked as a staff photo editor at USA Today, Reuters, and the Seattle Times, and on contract as a photo editor at the Gates Foundation and MSNBC.com. She's a graduate of the William Allen White School of Journalism at the University of Kansas. She now lives in Marin County with her daughter and 2 cats. She joined the Emerson Collective in Palo Alto, California in January 2017 as senior photo editor and photographer. And we have copies of her book back there, so normally $59.95 on sale for $40, so I encourage you to take a look at that, and Barbara's going to tell you a lot about the book tonight, so let's welcome Barbara.
Thank you. So where's my AV woman who's supposed to oh, there we go. Thank you. Turn the lights down. Yeah, so here's a copy of the book. Thank you all for coming. I flew in last night. My plane was delayed out of Denver, and I ended up in a shuttle bus at about 12:30 a.m. driving through the snowy streets of Iowa City to get to my hotel, and was like, I feel like I'm on the campaign right now. And then I had to wake up 6 hours later, so I really felt like I was on the campaign. So this is me and Hillary back in 1993 when I was fortunate enough to get this incredible temporary job to basically, I got a call to be with Hillary Clinton during the week of inauguration, to follow her during all the festivities that week, because the campaign photographer who'd been on the campaign for months was going to be with Bill Clinton. They needed somebody to be with Hillary Clinton. And so a friend that I knew from previous work tossed my name into the First Lady's press office, and I got this call, and so that's what sort of started really a change in my professional career, ending up working at the White House. But the funny story about this is I was a newbie. I didn't know I hadn't done campaigns. I didn't know anything about how any of this worked. And in Inauguration, which is like, mid-January in DC, was freezing. So I'm wearing long johns, black pants, long underwear, a turtleneck, and a sweater, and I worked the whole inauguration day. And then we went back to the White House. I literally was in the motorcade that drove down Pennsylvania Avenue into the White House. And I didn't know if I had time to change. I didn't know what I was doing, because I was such a newbie at all this, that I went through the evening following them in the motorcade at 14 different balls that they have throughout DC, sweating profusely because I had all this stuff on, and I never knew that I would have time to change. I was in the motorcade. I was like, can I just take my sweater off? I'm like, no, we're at the next hotel. So that was a lesson learned. I became an expert in changing clothes in a van while editing photos within minutes. So that's the funny part about this story in this picture. And that was actually the first time I actually met Hillary. I'd been following her for a few days, but that was when we actually got introduced. So I'm going to start with a few White House photos. So yeah, I ended up being a White House photographer during the Clinton administration for just over 6 years. And this is on Air Force One. Back then we were shooting film. Digital didn't happen until way after I left the White House. So we were shooting film. One of my favorite things to do at the White House, I wasn't so interested in the political part of that world, funny enough. I was much more interested in how the president and first lady and family were pictured in their everyday lives. That's what I thought we all could relate to and meant more to me. And so that's what I really, I feel was my best skill in working there. This was like, we were coming down from the residence. President Clinton was walking to the Oval Office. Chelsea just got home from school. She was in high school, just got home. They had a quick moment. I did a couple pictures and backed off. And it was just a sweet moment. So this is an audience. I always say this when I go speak at different places. It's like, who can name all these people in this photo? I see a few people out who probably can. So this was at the Botanical Gardens in D.C., and it was the inauguration of the First Lady's garden. And so these are all former First Ladies, which you can probably pick out who's who. Nancy Reagan, Lady Bird Johnson, Hillary in the middle there, Rosalind Carter, Betty Ford, and Barbara Bush. And this was just backstage before they went out. My claim to fame with this photo is Annie Leibovitz came to the White House to do some work, and she was in our photo editing office, and somebody called me. I was over in the West Wing. Come over here, like Annie Leibovitz is looking at your picture. And so I went over there. I was like, hi, I'm Barbara. And she's like, I love this photo. I would love a copy. Do you want to trade? I was like, so I have this great, she sent me some selections of photos, and I have this great black and white photo of Bruce Springsteen that I chose, so yeah. We called this hairdo the flip. As you know, Hillary was always judged and talked about for her hair. And later on in the 2016 campaign, we laughed about how there was finally somebody whose hair got more comments than Hillary, and that was Trump. This was the second inauguration, so 4 years later, and my boss was doing a portrait of the two of them, and I was just over to the side doing some candids. So this photo it got me a lot of attention. It was in 1995 during a Mideast Peace Accord meeting and signing, and all the Middle East leaders were there. And it was a really fascinating day just being around them in the Oval Office with all, Arafat and Rabin, and every time you looked around there was another photo that was happening, and it was really incredible. We went down to the this is the Red Room in the White House, and they were getting ready to be announced into the East Room for the big public sign-in event. And they lined up as they were going to be announced. And Stephen Gooden, who was the president's aide, was over my shoulder here, and he was like, Mr. President, you need to straighten your tie. And I was, for those of you who are photographers, I had a Leica rangefinder, like manual advance. I'm looking through this eye and through the camera, and this eye I see all of them doing this. And I fired up 3 frames, and they all walked out, and I turned to Steve and I was like, that was really funny, God, I hope that's in focus. And it was, amazingly, and we sent it to Life magazine. They ran it double truck, and then entered it in the World Press Photo Award ceremony, which I got a first place, which was pretty amazing. And whenever I'm around the President Clinton, because I've done a lot of work with him since, And if you were standing next to him and I was there, and he'd go, Barbara, this woman, she took this picture of me straightening my tie, and all these world leaders were doing it, and it's so amazing. And it's like, that's a bad impersonation of President Clinton, but he always does it, and I just sit there and smile. And so after the White House, I moved to Seattle, started freelancing, but it continued to do work with the Clinton Foundation. And generally every year President Clinton would do a trip either to Africa, Asia, wherever, to meet with the different organizations that the Clinton Foundation was funding. And Chelsea went with us on a couple of trips, which, whenever she was around, it just allowed for a lot more interesting, intimate pictures. Both Hillary and the president, there's just something sweet about having her around that, makes for some great pictures. And this was on a tarmac in some country. I don't know where. This is in I believe, maybe Ghana. We got to go to South Africa and meet with Nelson Mandela, which was an amazing, obvious experience. This is his home, and he passed away less than a year later from this photo. But this is one of those, people ask me about moments working at the White House or with the Clintons, like what's stands out, and you meet so many, you're around so many incredible people, and sometimes you have to take a step back and realize like the presence that you're in, like Mother Teresa. I really felt it when I was around her, like, oh my God, this is an icon. And Nelson Mandela was the same. But saying that, I'm not thinking about that when I shoot this picture. I'm thinking about, God, I hope I get a good picture. Oh my God, is my camera set right? Please, camera, don't jam on me. How am I going to do this? Because generally you have all these different people that are running around behind you or trying to get in the photo, and it's like, I just want a picture of them together. And it happened, and it was quick, but I look at it now and it's like, wow, that was an incredible moment. I also was fortunate enough, so I've known Chelsea since she was at the White House, when I was at the White House when she was 12. And I photographed her 13th birthday at the White House, where she invited all her friends, and she wouldn't even look at me in the eye. She looked at me like I'm a photographer, and like, because if you remember back in the early days of the Clinton campaign, she wasn't treated very kindly. They harassed her cat Socks, if you remember that. And she was like, there was the hands off with her. And so I don't think she necessarily trusted me. That changed as years went by, and we got to know each other. And I remember one time walking from my parking garage in DC to the White House, and I'm trudging along. I had the late shift that day. And I'm walking along, I hear, "Hey, Barb." And I look over, and there's Chelsea hanging out of her Secret Service vehicle, waving at me, "Hey!" Because she was in high school and was a little more sort of, comfortable with herself. And so when her wedding came around, it was like she wanted me to photograph it. And so it was me and another wedding photographer out of Boston and a couple of assistants. And I love this photo because that's Dorothy in the middle, who's Hillary's mom, and this three-generation of really special, strong women means a lot to me. And I think this picture also resonates with them because Dorothy was there. From the Chelsea wedding, though, more importantly, I got the cover of People magazine, not with this photo, but with another one. So more people are impressed with my cover of People magazine than my tie picture, than Time or Newsweek's like, "You got the cover of People?" I was like, yeah. Again, another Clinton Foundation moment, backstage. All right, so now we're going to get into the 2016 campaign stuff. So I don't know how you want to do this. I'm most comfortable with people asking questions. We can go through these images. I can tell stories. If you want to shout out a question, that's fine too. I'm not a great public speaker, so I work best when I'm just sort of in conversation. So with that, this,
Questions.
we're not working. Good. Oh, questions. Oh, perfect. So this was in her private office in New York, and we were just leaving, and she was in the hallway, and this was like, the light was great, and it was kind of cool. So some of these pictures that I'm going to show you made it to my book. Some didn't. This is an early edit, so you'll see some stuff that you won't see in the book. This is on the campaign plane. And what's interesting about this, and I was trying to describe this last night to somebody, so we were in this little like I'm not a plane person, G5, G whatever. So it's a small plane, so I'm like this with her. So it's not like I'm standing back and she doesn't know I'm there. It's like I am right here. So I would take a couple frames and move on. But, you know, I saw her like this, and it was just, you know, kind of cool. I love that. I love this photo. So after, I don't know how many of you have gone to these, you know, campaign events. I'm sure we're in Iowa, so I'm sure you all have been to these. What she would do is collect stuff from the audience, books, pictures, just whatever, and we'd go back after every rally, and she'd sign stuff, and then our advance team would go back and pass it back out. So she'd generally have a stack of books or pictures or whatever, and so we just had this thing that we, you know, a process to get everything back out there. This is some of our staff on the plane. This is campaign life, you know. You live on a plane. So one of the fun things we got to do was go to Saturday Night Live, which I thought was really cool. I mean, I've been a huge fan for years. And aside from the picture, this is Kate McKinnon, who impersonates her, obviously. But the really cool thing about Saturday Night Live is we were there from like 4 p.m. on, and they do this whole process. You know, Lauren Michaels came in to talk to her, and they have the script, and they go through the lines, and they do a practice, and then they rewrite stuff, and then at 8 o'clock, which I never knew this, at 8 o'clock they have like a audience come in, and they do a run-through of the show. And they get reactions from all the skits, they get reactions, and then they come and rewrite again. Yeah, it's amazing. From words, from gestures, they really talk about stuff and figure out what's gonna work. And then by then, after the 8 o'clock show, at about 10 o'clock, Hillary's like, how much longer do we have to stay? And it was like, it's Saturday Night Live, so 11:30, and then by 11:30, it's like, boom, it just is seamless. It's pretty amazing. It was a lot of fun doing. This was before I think a speech she gave after she won maybe the Las Vegas, Nevada primary in Las Vegas. And Connolly, who was our trip director, was like, hey, Barb, I think you might want to go next door, and there's a cool picture happening. So fortunately, I was surrounded by staff that I'd worked with for years, but that knew how important photos were, which helped me do my job. It helped me get access and be there when I needed to be. And it's funny because they got to the point, it's like, hey, this is a good picture. You know, get off your butt and come over and look at this. So if you, I love this photo. I think only people in Iowa, nobody reacts to this picture, but because you all were around when Martin O'Malley was here, yeah. And so this was when I took it, I thought it was really a cool picture because I wasn't even supposed to be back there. Generally, this was before a debate. They don't allow campaign photographers to like go back there, but I just followed Hillary and nobody stopped me. And this was right before they were being announced, and it was just like this really cool photo. And Bernie, you know, yeah. So But then later in the campaign, it sort of became, what do I want to say, unimportant because nobody, O'Malley wasn't in it anymore, but I thought it was a cool photo. So I love your reaction, thank you. I always wonder when we went to schools and she would write on chalkboards for the kids the next day, a little note to them, like how they must feel when they come in the next day, which is kind of cool. And this was some school with posters all over the windows. I have no idea what this was. This didn't make the book, obviously. Yeah. Who knows what was happening? So one of the coolest things that I got from this campaign was the way that, you know, young girls reacted to her. It was really special. I have a daughter who's 15. She was 11, 12 at the time. And so to see these young girls who were really energized and felt empowered by her, it meant a lot. I just like this photo. I don't think I made it in the book, but I like it. Again, backstage before she's being announced. Some of the best photos are ones that are right before people are, you know, introduced out on stage. The sort of contemplative moments that happen. Luckily, nobody was around her. I love the like railings with the red and her coat. So before and after, immediately before and after events, oftentimes make for the best photos. So this is a funny picture. People magazine was doing an article on Chelsea, and they initially were going to bring a photographer, but then it's like, you know, who's better like involved with them than me and has better access, so would I be up for taking pictures for People magazine? And it was like, yeah, that sounds great to me. And they sent me a list of like their wants, and this was crazy. They wanted like, you know, Hillary and Chelsea holding hands as they walk into the hotel room, and you know, all this kind of stuff. Hillary and Chelsea in a car riding together. It's like, oh my God, it's impossible. I'm not going to ask them to do this. And I pretty much checked off a bunch of the pictures that they wanted, but I didn't have them in a car. And I'm walking out with Chelsea. I'm like, hey, Chelsea, can I take a picture of you and your mom in the car? She's like, yeah. Hey, Mom, Barb wants to take a picture. I'm like, okay. So they get in the car, and I'm over on that side of that door. And I love candids. I don't like posed. And I'm trying to take the picture, and they're looking at me smiling. No, this isn't what I want. And you know, Chelsea's real big because she's right in the foreground in front of me. I'm like, okay, think. And I'm like, and I ran around because the light was really gorgeous, right? I mean, this is just like natural light. I ran around, and the Secret Service agent who was getting in the front seat, I'm like, hey, can I just get in here for 1 second? Just let me get one photo. He's like, yeah, okay. So I get in, I'm in the front seat, and I have my camera, and again, they're looking right at me. I'm like, no, you guys like talk or something. And they're like, again, okay, hi. You know, like you know, when you ask people to do something, you totally lose that moment. And I was like, oh, this isn't working. And time is so important. I have like just seconds to do this. And so Mark, who's in the back seat, who's Chelsea's husband, had just taken their daughter Charlotte to the zoo for the first time ever. And he said out of the blue, hey, do you want to see pictures of Charlotte at the zoo? And it's like, yeah. So he hands them the phone. They totally forget I'm there. I'm shooting away and shooting. And I was like, okay, I'm done. See ya. Bye. I was like, they were totally engrossed. So this is exactly what I wanted, you know. So it was sort of creative, but not, because it was a real moment. But it was, again, I got lucky because the light was gorgeous. But they were totally into it, and just, you know, mom and grandma looking at pictures of the daughter. So it was cool. One thing, you know, after rally after rally after rally, you try and look for different angles, different viewpoints, something that's going to make it a little bit not so monotonous because, all these rallies tend to a little bit kind of be alike in a lot of ways. So I went up we were at a gymnasium, as we've been in hundreds of gymnasiums, high school gymnasiums, and I looked down on her, and she would do this. She'd take a moment before she's announced. I think this was at a church in South Carolina as we were leaving. This is one of my favorite photos. I don't think it made it in the book. That's Isabel, who has been with Hillary almost as long as I have. She's a hairdresser in D.C. She's a little French girl who we love, Isabel. And she has been doing Hillary's hair for years. In fact, I just saw there's a Hulu documentary. You've probably seen ads for it coming out in March on Hillary, and one of the like promos has Isabel coming in behind her and straightening her hair. So I love this because Hillary's oblivious to her as she's studying her notes. Just another great moment with a little girl. So this is in the forward of the book. I'm surprised. I was a little shocked that I gave Hillary and the campaign not final edit, but I ran the book by them to make sure that everything was okay. And I didn't think that they would okay this photo. She's in her glasses. She's got her little blanket and her book. This was after she won some primary, I don't remember, I'd have to look at the date. And that's, if you were to zoom in on that photo, the caller ID is Bill Clinton. Congratulating her on the win, and we were all celebrating, so it was a great moment. It's an ice cream place in New York that's pretty well known. So this This was the final game of the World Series, and Hillary's a big Chicago Cubs fan, and we were doing an event. I can't remember where we were, but we were doing an event, and we had just finished it, and rather than getting in the motorcade, because we missed the last inning, when they actually were going to ended up winning the World Series, somebody pulled it up on an iPad, and we were watching it, and there's another picture which I think made it into the book where she's in the car, like, yay. So, and Connolly, who has her mouth over her hand, she's from Chicago as well. So that's it. This is just a cool photo. I like it because of the colors, just coming down from the plane, yeah, just like the colors. I don't know what more to say about it. So these guys were goofballs. They showed up at a couple of different events. I could never tell if they were being, I kind of thought they were Bernie supporters and they were kind of making fun of her, but they kept showing up. And they never had like Hillary regalia, but they one time took their shirts off and drew and they got in the front row. And I don't know whether they were just being sort of flippant and sarcastic, but when she came down, it was just a funny moment. That's Gavin Newsom, who's now the governor of my state where I live in California. I'm not from California, but I live there now. When you're out working on these campaigns, it's always important to look for detail shots because that sort of tells the story of what's going on. So oftentimes, I take pictures of people who had books that were, handing them across the crowd, or just these little things like this, or signs or hats or whatever. It just helps tell the story. So you really have to pay attention to that kind of stuff that's going on. It's not just shooting the candidate, and it's covering the whole event. So I have mixed feelings about this photo because I love it. of course, all of you probably, the first thing that comes to mind is lock her up, right? Maybe not if I hadn't said that, but what's really interesting, and I didn't find this out until months later, this was in June. We were in California, and it was about 3 days before, maybe 2 days before she actually won the nomination. But they knew at this point that she had. They knew that we had enough votes and enough numbers. And her staff came in and was like, before you go out, you've got to like announce this and say that I've won the nomination and blah, 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 blah. And all I saw were all these people in there with her, and I was taking pictures, and then everybody suddenly left. And I was like, oh, cool, she's alone. That's really cool, too. And I take a picture. Found out later that she was adamant that she did not want to do that. And they were having back and forth, like, arguments about the fact that she did not want to go out there until she had officially won, which was 2 days later. And so she was just kind of pissed off that they were trying to force her to do something. And again, months later, I found out about this. It's a cool photo. It's amazing the people that toss their babies over the crowd so that candidates can hold them, kiss them, whatever. Just backstage, iPhone's flashlight is great for lots of reasons. Obama came out and did a couple of things with us, which was fun because, I mean, again, it just gives a different dynamic. And it's obviously it's Obama, so. This is in the book, and it's a really funny story. So we were coming back from someplace. I can say that about any of these photos. We were coming back from someplace. And this was her speech that she was going to give at the convention. And it was a draft of the speech, and she had written notes on the speech. And one of these, either Nick, who's holding this up, or Dan, who's a speechwriter, spilled water on it. And she's like 10 feet away in her seat, facing the other way. So she never realized this happened. They spilled water on it, and so they're drying it with the vents of the... So you see her like smeared words. This was the only copy they had with her comments on it, and they're quickly trying to repair the damage. I was going to call this photo 3 Presidents, but...
Well, technically.
Yeah, I know. That was, yeah. So, you know you've made it in the world of photography when one of your photos becomes a meme. And this photo is a meme. Whenever, I don't know if you've seen it on Facebook or places, but whenever Trump does or says something stupid, which is often, somebody will take this photo and put, can you believe he said that, you know, we need to call a judge about this, but this is already in front of the Supreme Court, and that was a really bad sort of like description. But if you do it like a search on Obama and Hillary laughing, you'll see a bunch of memes. You know, he served burgers and fries at the White House, blah, you know, and it's funny. So a quick story about this photo. This was at the Democratic Convention right before she went out to give her speech. And Chelsea was introducing her, and so I was backstage, and there was like a gaggle of people behind me, and Hillary was nervous about this. And she came in, looked at Chelsea on the TV, and I shot this great picture, and then she was like, she said to Huma, one of our advisors, can I go someplace and watch this alone? And I realized I needed to back off. So I did, and I went in the other room, and I was like, oh, wait, I should like send this to our office. And I had a camera that you could wirelessly send photos, sort of like an iPhone, but it was her real camera. And so I sent it to the office, like, here's a photo that's kind of cool. And I tracked from when I took this picture to when I went into the other room, and I took the picture on TV as ABC was projecting it. And it was 11 minutes from when I took the picture to when it was around the world on network TV. That was amazing. That's like, you know, the process worked when we wanted to get a photo out. It was just, I was like, I walked by and I was like, hey, that's my photo on TV, you know? It was really, really cool. Then we started a bus tour right after the convention. This is one of my favorite photos. I got to spend a week with Tim Kaine as he was just joining the campaign as a presidential candidate. And so I got to go out with him and his team, sort of so he could get used to being having a photographer around, and so whatever. And this, I just thought, was the classic campaign event. He's on an apple crate. We're in, I think it was Austin. It was probably in this place. I bet it was 110 degrees inside. We're just drenched. And I just think it's one of these classic photos. This is Nick, our press secretary, and it was just a real fun moment. We had a small traveling staff in the beginning. It was me, Nick, Julie, our videographer, Connolly, and whomever. It was just like 5 or 6 of us. And so we became pretty close. And she's actually talking to one of the President Clinton's assistant who was on the phone with Nick and you know, yelling at him about, you know, something funny. So this is Maya Harris, who's Kamala Harris's sister. Maya was a senior advisor on our campaign, and she was showing Hillary the newborn pictures of her granddaughter. And so it was basically 2 grandmas who were, you know, talking about their grandkids. This photo, really interesting. I don't know where we were, some holding room before she goes out to speak, and she sits down in this lawn chair, sort of folding chair. And I took this picture, and we sent it out, and it like went viral. Like people were, look at this hardworking woman who's like in this trashy, you know, hold room, looking over her notes and working so hard. It had like 20,000 shares because somebody like shared it, and it just went, you know, again, viral. And it was just kind of this simple, normal photo of her backstage, but it had, it resonated with a lot of people. I'm not sure what to say about this, but when we were doing, I was shooting this debate, and I was like, I looked at the other photographers, and I was like, he's like stalking her from behind. Isn't this bizarre? Remember his body language and how he was like coming behind her? And she actually talks about it now later. It's like, I felt like he was just like looking over my shoulder and coming up behind me, and it made me really feel awkward, but yeah. This is just coming back to Chappaqua, where we flew out, not Chappaqua, Westchester, the airport, which is where we flew in and out of, because she lives in Chappaqua, so it's the nearest airport. And I was walking over to the van to take me back to my place, and I looked back and saw this light, and it was just like a really cool shot. So this was the morning after, the morning after the election, and she's going out to speak to her staff and some supporters, and it was tense, but she was like kind of taking care of all of us, making sure we were okay. I was hiding behind my camera because I was crying, and I didn't want her to see me crying. And you know, they grabbed hands. They're very supportive of each other, and it was just kind of this like intense but special moment. This was the staff party about a week later. She's consoling everyone. Although I want to go back to this. So she goes out and gives this, you know, speech about how, I don't remember what she said, but you know, she's trying to build us all up and telling us that it's okay, and you know, we fought a good fight and blah, blah, blah. The most important thing that stood out to me as the Clintons then left, they were walking out the back part of the wherever we were, And Hillary pulled one of her advisors aside, I think it was Huma, and said, listen, so the crowd was staffers and supporters and everybody was a mess, and she pulled the person aside and said, listen, everybody out there is really upset. I mean really upset. We need to make sure that we take care of them. I want you to follow up to make sure everybody's okay. And I was like, I still get a little teary-eyed when I talk about this. I was blown away because of all the people who should be a frickin' mess and be like falling apart, it's her. But she was just worried about us. And that's the kind of stuff that people don't, see or know about her, I read an interview later that she then got in the car and collapsed and couldn't talk and yeah. So she's a pretty strong woman, and so this is a party about a week later. She's consoling all the staff. This is Adam, who is one of our outreach leaders. So, onto a happier note. So the one thing about the 2016 campaign, part of the way through compared to 2008, because I shot that campaign, I was talking to a few of the other photographers, the press photographers, and it's like, something is missing in these rallies. There's something that's, I don't know what it is, and we finally figured out that back in 2008, when she'd finished giving her speech, and if any of you all have been to these rallies, you go, she works the rope line, right? Walks through the crowd, shakes hands, talks to people. People ask her questions and da-da-da-da. And so you get these great photos of people interacting with her. Sort of like the little girl who was crying in one of the photos. That was missing because all people care about now is taking a selfie, And so you have all, and which was really cute at first to see, oh, look, somebody's taking a selfie. It's so funny, what a great picture. And then after the, 10,000th selfie, it's like, really? And so I just really felt that there was this connection with people that was missing. And even Hillary noticed it. And she said one time in an interview that as she walks along the rope line and she sees somebody, and she can tell in their eyes, they want to ask her a question. And she's like, well, they maybe want to have a healthcare question or whatever. And they look and they think, I have this 1 second, what am I going to do? I'm going to do a selfie. And so there's this connection that's missed. Because if you don't have a selfie, maybe you weren't there, you didn't get to meet her, which is kind of sad. But, so in the book, we had as my editor and I were going through all these photos, we had tons of selfies. And there were fun photos and good photos and whatever, but, how many can you put in there? You can't, we have to start deleting photos. And he said, well, why don't we do now I can't remember the name of it. It's a name for it. But anyway, if you look at the book, in the back we have this fold out of a bunch of selfies on both sides. We just crammed them all into one page, which is kind of fun. So yeah, in the back it's there's probably 50 selfies on either side of the thing. So these are selfies. Famous people take selfies, They did a selfie. No, look, Cory Booker who's the best selfie taker because he's got long arms. I'm the worst because I like my short arms. Gabby Gifford and her husband. So this is another photo. I bet I have been asked for reproduction of this photo 30 or 40 times. I got an email last week. A lot of times it's from, which is really interesting, people who are doing their masters or some sort of paper or textbook about technology today. And they want to use this photo because it's the Selfie Generation is what somebody titled it. Again, so many people, I can't even tell you how many people have requested to use this photo. A couple things about this. What's really funny is, like, there's one old guy with a beard up there who's not doing a selfie. He's just, like, looking. But what happened, this was in Orlando. We just done a rally. And generally, if you're in a place where the fire marshal says that's enough people, no more people can come into this room, we do an overflow room. And there are generally TVs that people set up so they can see her speaking. And so what happens is after the normal rally, she'll come over and walk into the room and say hi to people and generally work the rope line and do like the handshakes and the selfies and whatever. And I don't know, my guess is that we were all really tired because I remember going into this room going, no, don't go in there, let's go. And she goes in, it's like, okay. And what she looked up and said, I think she didn't want to work the rope line. I mean, I don't know. But she says, why doesn't everybody just turn around and do a selfie with me? And that's where that comes from. It's not like everybody just automatically did it. It's like, everybody do a selfie. And then boom. And so when I got back and I was editing my photos for the day, I was like, oh, does this really read? I'm not really sure. You know, it says what it's supposed to say. Thank goodness I added it because it took off. It's just gotten so much attention. Yeah, so, and I'm the only one who got it because the press, this happened so quickly, the press hadn't, the traveling press with us hadn't made it into the room, so, and then we were gone. And that's it, so.
Now, because we are streaming this live, if you have a question, you have to talk into the microphone, because otherwise the people at home only hear the answer.
It's going live? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Do we have questions?
Hello.
Hi.
I had heard that the 2008 campaign had a lot of chaos, dysfunction, and infighting, but this was somewhat lesser in 2016 campaign. How true is that, and how does it compare to what you saw in the actual Bill Clinton administration?
You know, I think a lot of times when people say they're infighting, which, you know, I heard that as well in the Kamala Harris, campaign. Being out on the road, you don't see that. And so whether it's true or not, I'm sure there are differences with the different advisors, and I'm sure there was some of that in 2016. 2008, I remember we did have problems with a couple like campaign managers. It didn't work out, and I don't see that because I'm out on the road with her, and I'm not privy to those kinds of conversations. So, but I won't deny that wasn't happening because obviously there was some dysfunction there. I thought 2016, I thought everything ran pretty well. I'm sure that there's going to be disagreements back in the office about different stuff, but I unfortunately don't really see it, So I don't know if that answered your question, but in the White House, the same thing. It's like you see advisors talking and disagreeing and whatever, but it's kind of just part of the process, I guess.
I wanted to ask the question that everybody wants the answer to. What were Obama and Hillary Clinton laughing about?
One of my best lines, and I totally forgot to say it. So that photo, because I didn't really talk about that beside the fact that it was a meme. So what happened was, this was when at the convention when Obama spoke the night before, and then like a surprise guest, and she comes out. And so Pete Souza, who's Obama's White House photographer, and I, walk backstage with him, and they go back down to this room, and we both are shooting, and kind of far away because I had a long lens because we didn't want to be on top of them. It was just us back there, and I don't know what they were laughing about. I did hear the word Bernie right before that. Honestly, Hillary will say she doesn't remember either, but I did hear that. So. Yeah. So I'm not. I don't know. I have to talk. I don't know about. I have to talk to Pete about that too. But I did hear the word Bernie.
Okay, I have a camera geek question. You said you started shooting, obviously, on film. What do you shoot on today? What is your camera, your favorite camera?
So I started with Nikons way back in college, and I've stuck with Nikon when Canon surpassed them with autofocus and all these cameras. And it's like, actually, when I first started at the White House, we had the option to switch to brand new Canon equipment. I chose to use the Nikon equipment that was left over by the Bush administration because I didn't want to start a new job that I was already really nervous about with new equipment. And so I stuck with Nikon and through their trials and tribulations until, both I think are pretty equal right now. So I shoot with Nikons. In the campaign, I think I had a D4S, and then also a 750, which was great because you could do wireless with the 750, not with a D4S. Plus Sony gave me a bunch of equipment to use. So I started using that, which was good. It wasn't, it's the Sony, I think the A9s are better than what the A7s were, but what's great about the Sonys is they have this silent mode that I could put the camera up to your ear and you could not hear me click it. And so that came in handy in private little moments where you didn't want to be like, plus it was also wireless, so you could send stuff. But I'm a Nikon girl.
Okay.
Although they're getting heavier, so I might have to go to some lighter.
Can you talk a little bit about, especially during the 16 campaign, so you have an 11-year-old daughter still in elementary school.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that the traveling group is not primarily made up of people with young kids at home. So how did that work for you?
I got a divorce in the middle of the campaign, if that helps. Yeah. That didn't work, actually. Yeah, even when I was at the White House, I was kind of a little bit older than some of the young staff that were there. 2008, I was gone from pretty much, I worked a little bit in January for the caucuses, but from February to June. Came back, and it was a hard readjusting to my life back there. My partner and our, had gone on with their lives, and I went, I was like, bummed that Hillary lost back then, and so we did some therapy, and it was like whatever. So, but 2016 rolls around, and it's like, and now they have a staff position. So I had a one-way ticket to New York, and I was like, let me just get there, figure it out. I might be able to be based in Seattle, which is where we were living. Let me just I don't know, let me figure it out. I think that there was just like lots of stuff that, just wasn't working. I mean, we weren't good anyway, but so she basically ended up having an affair with somebody, and in July I found out, and she moved out 3 weeks later with my daughter and went to California, which my options, and I'm very open about this, it's been years now, a few years now, but I had a choice of either quitting the campaign and going back to Seattle to fight to keep my daughter there. She was going to be entering middle school, and I wanted her to be with her friends from grade school. Or I could stay on the campaign and let them move to California. I made the decision to stay on the campaign for reasons of not wanting to cause a lot of fighting between us and to affect our daughter. And I quit this great job. I'd go back to Seattle, and chances of losing custody anyway, so I'd be like, well, I'll lose everything. So it's like, it was just a really hard time. And I have to say, I mean, there were a couple like heart-to-hearts Hillary and I had about it. She was really great. And she said, you do what you need to do. I'll help you, give you any legal advice you need. So it was, I mean, we would have split anyway probably, but this sort of accelerated it. And it was hard because I would get away when I could to spend time with my daughter. She came to New York a couple of times, which was fun, but it was hard. And it was great. I lost a lot of weight. I looked great. Running around the campaign, but also being just like emotionally distressed about everything. My campaign family helped get me through it. We were really close. And I have to say, and I tell this all the time, but the silver lining of Hillary losing was I didn't have to make that decision of if she'd won of going to work at the White House and doing this like incredible dream job that I'd wanted and not being with my daughter. So part of me was like, okay, this is what I'm meant to do. And this is why I'm not on a campaign now, because it's, my daughter's 15 now, sophomore in high school. I'm supposed to be there. So it was, it was tough. But it's like there are a lot of other people. Granted, a lot of people in the campaign are young, and they've got nothing going on. They're sharing rooms, and and there are some other people like who commute back and forth between their families, and sometimes a couple of the families moved to New York for that time. I was there for 18, 20 months, and but yeah, so. Yeah, I'm an open book also.
Hi, I'm a major in journalism, and I consider myself as a photojournalist. So, you were the former White House photographer and a Hillary campaign photographer. So, you must be like a fast-paced and pretty tense job position. Like you have to take photos during the campaign and the backstage photos. So how did you do that? How do you manage yourself in this such quick pace position?
Well, yeah, I think the experience that I've gained over the years doing this helps me kind of know where to be and when to be. And there's a lot of when you come to an event and the motorcade pulls up, I know I have to bust out of that van to get ahead because she's going to come out of the car or he's going to come out of the car, and I need to be ahead. And so I know that, and I know when to get in. I know, it's just from years of experience of doing that and knowing where to be, and where to be and when, and reading people's faces and knowing when it's okay to be there and not, and just kind of snaking your way through. Yeah, so it's fast-paced. You've got to figure out when to rest. When you have a 2-hour ride from one Iowa city to another, to fall asleep in the van for a few minutes to rest, eat something. It's all sort. It's a kind of a dance to just. Because after these rallies, we go backstage and do handshakes with people, and so there's more of doom, 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 and boom, you're off to the next place. I found that on the vans and on the plane is when I rested, and you just got to kind of pace yourself. Lots of protein bars. So does that answer your question? It's just it's funny because. I was talking to somebody today, it's like you get into this mode of so many hours of sleep a night, and you get up and you just keep going, you work on adrenaline. And I gotta tell you, what I always say is we will do 2 or 3 events in the day, and we have one more in the evening, and the last thing you wanna do, it's dark, it's cold, you just wanna go to the hotel. But the evening crowds are awesome. For whatever reason, you come into this gym and it erupts, and it just gets you, the adrenaline just starts flowing, and some of the best events are in the evenings, The crowds are just crazy and they're fun, and it reminds me of how excited people are to see Hillary or, whichever candidate, and that's why they're there. And so that just makes it just so much more fun. And you can collapse later. You can always sleep later, right?
First of all, that's just beautiful photography.
Thank you.
Just
Thank you.
very wonderful, and it comes across that you love Hillary, and
Yeah.
and I've heard and read in other places that she engenders a lot of loyalty because she treats people very well. I'm just wondering, in terms of as a photographer, did that get in your way at all of of ever showing her sides that were not complimentary, or any tensions she had with Bill?
Yes and no. You know, I don't think I ever didn't take a picture that was maybe uncomfortable, or, you know, you're still going to do your job and shoot the pictures. That photo might not get out anywhere, because obviously my job in the White House and on the campaign is to make her or them look good, right? And I want them to look good. And that doesn't mean to say that I didn't shoot pictures where things might have been tense or uncomfortable. Maybe that would be my second book. not that I have any, but I mean, I was in the White House during the Monica thing. I mean, there was some tension there, you know. And in those moments, it's like you don't want to overstay your welcome. You don't want to like get in too close and piss people off. You know what I mean? My job is to show them in a good light, right? So, if I was a press photographer, things would be different. But, you know, no, is that?
Yeah, your role is
Yeah.
not to like an independent journalist that
Right.
catches the right moment when, like, Hillary throws a "if looks could kill" look at Bill.
Well, the one picture of her in the elevator, she didn't look great in that, you know, right? That's part of the campaign. I don't even know what was going on, but, you know, there were more affectionate moments with them than the other, I have to say. I mean, the other probably behind closed doors. That they do have a really, really good working relationship with each other, you know, and a very affectionate one too. There, you know, especially as the years have progressed, I think. So it's not like there's all this fighting going on with them. There just isn't, you know. So.
This is somewhat related question, but you know, in your role, you have tremendous access. How did you navigate like when to leave, when to give some privacy, and when to be there?
Yeah, that's something that you learn as well, working in the White House. Like one of the first night shifts I had was President Clinton and the Secretary of Defense, and all these people were in the Oval Office talking about gays in the military. Because if you remember way back then, the Republicans kind of forced him to make this one of his first decisions about what to do, and I didn't know how I was supposed to shoot stuff. So I had a long lens. I was standing outside the Oval Office in the Secretary's office shooting with a long lens. You know, I'm not sure if I can even go in there. You know, and later on I'd be over his shoulder with a wide angle shooting because I learned how to do the dance around it all. And he also learned who I was, you know, me and the other photographers, who we were, became comfortable with us. You know, I shot him getting his health, you know, on a treadmill with like, you know, the things all over his, you know, hearts and shorts, you know, and I'm in there shooting. And, you know, so it's like you learn, we got to know each other. The one thing about, again, sort of answers your question a little bit, in the White House and on the campaign, they know they have control over the photos. You know what I mean? So they know even if I'm there photographing it, in the end, they will have control, or their staff, of what gets out there. So, so knowing that, I think in the beginning of the White House they didn't realize that, because you know they had a lot of issues on the campaign with photographers and press, and there wasn't a happy marriage between the Clintons and press back then. I don't know, back to the socks picture. Do you remember the picture of Socks on the ground with this whole pool of photographers around him? It was, a photographer took it from the ground, and Socks was like looking at the camera like this, and all these photographers are behind him, you know. It's the Canada's cat, you know, and it upset Chelsea, and it was like, don't take pictures of the cat anymore, you know. And so there was a mistrust of a lot of press. similar to what's going on with the Royals now. That's all over the news. But once the Clintons, got into the White House and we realized we're a team and we're all together, I shot the first Christmas at the White House with, President Clinton's mom and Christmas morning as they're opening gifts. There was that kind of stuff because what was great about the Clintons, not only as they got to know us and were comfortable with us, they also know the importance of photographs. And they realize that this is a document of history. Again, the White House photographer's job, I said this earlier in a podcast today, is to document the presidency for history. So whatever goes on, we're there. And they also realized, I think, wow, we're getting great family photos from all of this. But there was definitely a period of sort of figuring each other out. And there were times where, should I be here? Should I leave? I don't know. The last thing I wanted is for them to say, get out of here, So that was my biggest fear in life, was like, they're going to get out of here. And, there was one time, a story I like to tell, about the same time period where the picture of Chelsea in the hallway. And I had just been in the Oval Office. And I walked out because I was done with whatever I was doing. And I look and I see Chelsea coming on the outside patio area, the colonnade, which you always see. And she's going into the other door into the Oval Office. And there's out in the secretary's door leading into the Oval, there's a people, so you can see what's going on. So you know when to go in or when not to go in. And I look, and I see Chelsea go and sit on his lap at the Oval Office desk. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is such a great picture. I'm like, oh, what do I do? Because a lot of times when I would go in the Oval Office, you go after somebody else does, and you just like sneak in behind them. And so that was a great move, but it's like, oh, and I like knocked on the door, and I opened up the door, and it's like, I know you might fire me for this, but can I take a picture? And he looked up like that, and Chelsea's like, hey, Barb! I was like, yeah, okay. So I came in, and the moment was kind of lost a little bit because, they're there like, okay, now that I know I'm there, but I still got this great picture. I should have included it here, but it was a great picture. I mean, she's in high school, and she's on her dad's lap at the Oval Office desk. It was pretty awesome. And I took a few pictures, like, thanks, and I left. Again, you got to kind of know when to come and go. You read their faces. There were a number of times when there was, like Tony Lake, who was our, was it NSC or some sort of security thing, defense, whatever, and when there'd be like these high-level military meetings in the Oval Office, and Tony Lake would always look at me and look like, leave. And I was like, you're not the one who's going to tell me to leave, but I like Tony. And I was like, okay. So I'd make sure I wouldn't make eye contact with him. And literally, there was one meeting. There was some special meeting. I don't know what was going on, and I knelt down behind a sofa. It was a press, pool spray, and I knelt down behind the sofa when everybody left, and then just kind of like then stayed. So you just kind of like know when to be there and know when not to, and know when to leave. So it's something that I learned. I was bad at first, but I learned. All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This
Thank you
was
all for coming.
fascinating.